Hello and welcome to another Ken 7 chat. My name's Gav Jones and joining me today are Craig Watson, who's a football agent, and Scott Elliott again. Guys, welcome. The idea of this podcast today is really to get through to the nuts and bolts of a transfer. I mean, as a fan, you watch through the media and there's a lot of jargon and a lot of things that get rolled out all the time about transfers, and I want to try and sort of decipher that and get a better understanding. And who better to basically talk me through that than an actual agent, and then somebody whose son's been through that process. So what I'll do is I'll come to you first, Craig. Can you just give us a little sort of synopsis of what who you work for, what you do, that sort of thing first?
Yeah. Hi guys, nice to see you this morning. So I'm an international football agent. I've been working with the Sports Entertainment Group, SEG, for about 7-8 years now. We're predominantly an international agency working in Europe into the markets, but also I'm based in London, in Essex. Run the Southeast for SEG, have done for the last 2 years, have a team of agents that work from the Premier League down to maybe National League. And across Europe.
Okay. Scott, can you tell everybody who you are? I'm joking.
Cheers, Craig. Yeah, I'm Scott Elliott. I'm Craig's mate.
Okay. I anticipate that transfers work either two ways, Craig. One way where the club wants to sell a player, and the second way where the player wants to move and speaks to his agent and say, I want to move. Would that be accurate? And do those two processes, are they different?
Yeah, I mean, normally, so a player wants out for whatever reason. It might be that he's got feels he's got a better opportunity or a step up, or the club wants to get rid because they're not quite seeing him anymore and they want to clear their wage bill and bring someone else in who they think could do a better job, basically. It's the nuts and bolts of it. There is a third way as well. If an agent who's looking after the player feels that there's an opportunity where the player could grow, it might not be that the club want to sell the player or initially that the player wants to go, but an agent might say, well, look, we're looking at the pathway, we're looking at the opportunity, and this could really benefit you in your career and be a step up, So it's that, and he could actually get the ball rolling. So three principal ways of a transfer sort of coming around.
Scott, from your experience with Harvey, obviously Craig is Harvey's agent, I assume that. No. Okay. So what's been the experience for you with agents? How early did it happen with Harvey? How did that conversation come about?
Just approach, really, probably from about 11, 12 years old, really. Just obviously people are at games, watching games all the time, aren't they? So you sort of get approached, at some point. You get some weird ones, I was away of England and the toilet was basically a hole in the ground, and I was going to a toilet and the door didn't lock, and an agent actually chucked his head round the corner while I'm.
That weren't me for the record. That weren't me.
No, it wasn't, but I know it was. And I was pretty much like, mate, can you just give me 5 minutes, please?
Passing you the card. Yeah, mate, here's my card. I'm an agent. And you're like, well, I'm actually holding something at the moment, mate.
Still had room for the card. But it's crazy, mate. Some of them, but there's same as anything. For me, there's good ones, bad ones out there, but that's the same as any walk of life, isn't it?
Just staying with basically Harvey at the moment, Craig, is the recruitment of youth players. Is that something you get involved in, and how does that work? How do you hear about players that you should go and look at? Do parents contact you? How does that process work?
Yeah, with the younger players, obviously, that's where the journey begins. So we'll have a scouting network. We'll go to games, 2-3 games a week, every week. Under 16s, under 18s, under 23s. You'll have a network of contacts, you know, and it's a small world of football industry, and everyone talks about the best players as they come through. So in England, there's rules, there's intermediary rules laid down by the FA where you can't look after a minor under the age of 16. So really the process doesn't start until maybe the player's like 15, maybe entering his 16th birth year. And then the process really starts. And then in London, where it's very, very dense with players and agents, the competition's quite fierce. So, you know, they'll start early, and the guidelines are there to protect the players, you know, but not everyone follows them. And sometimes you're getting agents trying to tap players up at like 13 years of age, and families offering, you know, various incentives and stuff, you know. But yeah, I mean, we get involved at you know, 15 years of age. We start profiling the players, looking at the games. And obviously, our network is quite extensive, so it goes right into Europe. So it's kind of a format that we copy all the way through all the clubs in all the countries. So there's a scouting process. There's a procedure that we follow. You know, you identify the players, you do a number of reports, you profile him, his character. So it isn't just about football, it's about his background, about, you know, the type of personality he is. Reports from the club. Eventually we engage the clubs and ask the coaches about what their opinions are of the players. And then we sort of move on from there before making the approach to the family and seeing if it's something that they'd like to move forward with.
I imagine that clubs would like to recommend an agent that they trust for their player, especially a young player. Is that very important to develop relationships with clubs in you know, with that in mind?
Yeah, it is. It can work. There's pros and cons to that, because if I'm looking after a player, my influence is his best interest. Now, with an organisation like SEG, we're a very big company, so the financial side of it isn't a bearing on us as such. Whereas if you was a smaller agency and you needed to get that special player in to pay the bills, then it's a lot easier for them to cozy up with a club. And if that club's responsible for giving them their bread and butter, you could argue, are they going to do the best by the client or the best by the club? You know, so that's definitely one of the cons. One of the pros is that, you know, if the club respects you, then it's easier to get work done. It's easier to get, you know, the correct information about the player. You can understand the pathway of the player, where the club see him, what his future might be and look like at that club. So it's important to build relationships with the clubs. They do have their preferred agencies. You know, it's the same as in any walk of life. You'll have certain characters that you click with, and you get on with them well, and you seem to lean towards those. And there'll be other people that you're not quite having, and if every time they call, you go, "Oh, I'll swerve that one till later," you know, and you put it on the old voicemail. You know, it's the same in any walk of life, isn't it? So, but yeah, I'd say from my perspective, it's all about the client. You know,
just I'll bring you in on this, but Craig, I want you to answer this. Obviously, as a fan, you look at the way Chelsea run, and I realise Harvey had some dealings with Chelsea early on in his career. What do you think? Chelsea seem to have this? They seem to have a strategy of stockpiling the best young players, and they obviously try and develop them. But the upshot of it at the back end is that they can generate transfer fees, which then go into their transfer pot, which is a very intelligent way of doing it. But the welfare of the player, I always wonder about the welfare of the player in that. Scott, what do you think about that? Because you've seen it from Harvey's point of view, obviously.
What, in regards to how Chelsea do it?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, Chelsea. I mean, I have quite a lot of respect for the way they do it, but I don't know whether that has an impact on the welfare of the actual player. So, you know, what would you say? From your point of view, does it? Is it a problem? Is it a good way of doing it?
Well, look, it obviously works, doesn't it? When you're selling fringe players for 15, 20 million pounds, you sell 3 of them, and all of a sudden you're buying a world-class player. So, you know, you can't argue that it doesn't work. My experience of Chelsea with Harvey was a bit strange, if I'm honest, because we looked at a few clubs and they sort of had their group of players, 20, 25 players. When we went down to Chelsea, I mean, the first time we ever went down there, it looked like about 90 boys on about half a pitch.
Wow.
And there was a line of about 20 coaches just taking notes.
Wow.
And then the next week there was 45 boys. It was like it was chopped. So it was like they were looking people how they deal with a football, you know, and just running around doing little skills touches and then sort of hand picking so many. But I mean, again, for me, my view is that, you know, if football is about opinions, isn't it? You can have two people, one likes someone, one doesn't. That person who's in that high position ultimately gets the final say. You know, that's how I see it. I mean, I might be way off the mark there, but I can only go on my experiences and what I've seen in football. But the Chelsea system obviously works.
Yeah, I mean, Craig, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's not just Chelsea. There's a number of like top clubs that adopted this secondary business structure, if you like. So the football is the primary thing for the first team, and then on the side of it is a bolt-on, is that they're growing players to put back into the game at other clubs for a return on it, you know. And as Scott rightly said, you know, it gives them a pot where they can then go and facilitate their elite signings, isn't it? You know, it's a fantastic model, but everyone seems to, you know, a lot of the big clubs are adopting that now. Difficult. I mean, I don't totally agree with stockpiling players. I think it stifles opportunity, stifles growth of players, especially young players. I think there's been a little bit of a change since Brexit came in, because you can't go into Europe and bring those mid-band players in now for no money. So they're having to drop, you know, like under 23s, players who are ready for the first team but not getting the opportunity at the big clubs. They're having to put them in the smaller clubs down the leagues. So it's kind of improving the level of the clubs down the leagues as such. So it has flipped a little bit, but ultimately then players are going to go back to your Chelseas and your, you know, the other big clubs, and they're going to be sold on for X amount of pounds. And again, they're going to go out and get that elite player from the money that's raised. And is it an unfair advantage on the competitors? Maybe, but you know, they're not the only club that are doing it. But it's difficult. I mean, because you can argue on the other side, and I'm sure Chelsea would, is that the development that they provide. If you've got a club like Chelsea, Liverpool, any of the big clubs, Man United, on your CV, then you're going to come away from that club and you're going to get a career somewhere, aren't you? You know, with that amount of development, you know, and coaching that those clubs can give you. So it's kind of a win-win, really. You know, it's a win for the club, it's a win for the player.
Can I just pick you up on that? Because I've over the years, I mean, I used to go and watch Liverpool reserves as it was then, the under 23s as it is now, quite a lot. Yeah. And there was players there who looked promising, but then Liverpool had released them and they just simply disappear. Yeah. And that would be my take on it, that it's not that healthy to stockpile players, because those guys, they seem to just slip out the league completely. And I remember speaking to Paul Dalglish about it once, and I was like, why does that happen? He's like, you've got to realise that football at the lower levels is it's almost like a different sport. And they're not prepared for that, because they're used to playing on lush green pitches where they've got time on the ball, they're knocking it round, they've got another fantastic player next to them where they pass to, and everything seems a lot easier when you slip down the leagues. And I don't even know what the answer is. I mean, maybe you've got some thoughts on it yourself, but I don't know what the answer is with that in terms of trying to protect those players.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because, I mean, they could cap it, you know, but I mean, if you look at I mean, it's hard, because if you're looking at the players and all right, okay, so you're a young player, you're at Chelsea, you think you're going to be that player who comes through, and you don't. But then if you're one of those lucky few that go through and have a career somewhere else, you know, there's a load of players that I could probably pick up on who go on and have really successful careers, and sometimes they even end up back at their parent club, you know, they started with, you know. I would argue that if they're dropping down the leagues, and it is a different game down the leagues, it's more of an athletic, physical game down the leagues, you know. So I would argue if some of the boys, maybe they're not at the level, you know, maybe they, you know, maybe there was something that they, you know, what is it, 97% drop out, never come through. No, it's a first team football. It's crazy, but it's a harsh industry, you know. If you're a footballer, you know, you start off very early, maybe 7 or 8. You know, you give up the times of going to parties and going to shopping and whatever, because you're always training and your focus is to make it. You know, 10 years in, you're 19, you still ain't got there, and you're still working hard and trying to be that player. It is very difficult. You know, it's a harsh industry, but you know, the ones that do come through, they're going to have really, you know, fantastic careers and fantastic lives. But you know.
Let me just pick up on it, and Scott, you can talk about this. The loan system. So the loan system sometimes feels like it is a development step, but also sometimes feels like it's, well, we just need to get rid of him to anywhere because we can't help him here. Do you think the loan system works, Scott?
Again, on experience, I would say yes, it does.
Yeah.
But for me, it's a, you know, we touched on this before. I've spoke to other parents where their kids have gone out on loan, and they're looking for excuses. They're looking, oh, the parent club aren't doing this, they aren't doing that. Now, for me, you know, the player has to take responsibility, and the people around him. If he's going to go out on loan, he's got to go out and he's got to smash it up. He's got to have a great attitude. And he's got to use it to his advantage. But it's the same as a young player coming through as an academy player. If you get, there's an argument, isn't there? Like Craig touched on, if a young player goes to Chelsea, Liverpool, Man United, Man City, they've got all the best facilities, they've got everything. So coming down could be a bit of a shock. Where, you know, we sort of had the opportunity. We started off with QPR, and it was basically you're playing on a cow's field at times. You know, it's horrific. But I don't think that done Harvey any bad. Now, when you're going on loan, again, you know, just through Harvey's experience, we've gone on loan, and the first things we talk about is you got to be the first in, the last out. You got to have a good attitude. You got to lead by example. They're experienced players. They're 33-year-old players, 30-year-old players fighting for their last contract. They don't want some big-time Charlie kid coming in giving it the big one. Keep your head down, work hard, and earn the respect of them players. So, yes, it can work. But, again, by going on loan, you are missing out a little bit on the facilities, et cetera, but you're also broadening, you know, your views on how the world works. And if you've got the right attitude and you're going to work hard, I think you've always got a chance. And it's, you know, when Craig touched on it, when players go out on loan, that's fine going out on loan, but don't ever look at it as a negative. And if you go into an academy, you treat that academy. Too many people get hooked up, I think, on certain things in academies. And I think you as a player has got to go into that academy and go, do you know what? I'm going to use every facility they've got to make me the best I can be. And you've got to be a little bit selfish about it in the nicest possible way. And that's how you get better, isn't it?
No, I agree with that completely. Craig, let's move into the anatomy. I mean, I wanted to call this the anatomy of a transfer to try and get a better understanding of how transfer works, nuts and bolts. So let's say, for example, Liverpool are interested in Thiago, who they ended up signing, but it seemed to be very protracted. It seemed to take ages, and there was a lot of thing in the media where they said Liverpool are monitoring Thiago, which is like seems ridiculous because it's like you either know he's a top player or you don't. So why are they monitoring? Why don't they just put in a bid? How does that whole thing work? You know, why do things take ages?
I mean, 9 times out of 10 when they're saying they're monitoring, you know, if a club wants a player and they're saying they're monitoring, then it might be a hold up with the other club. They don't want to sell him, but the player wants to go. They're trying to negotiate around it. They're trying to get the player's agent to put pressure on the club to sell the player. It might be that there might be an outstanding medical. You're not sure if he's fit to come across. It also might be that, I mean, with a transfer, so a club will identify a weakness within the squad, and then they will go out and look for that profile of player. Now, there might be 3 or 4 options that are put on the table that could be of interest. Now, the top player could be, in this instance, Thiago. But there might be a B and a C option as well. Now, if they're not sure they're going to get the A option, then they'll say, well, look, we're monitoring him. And it might be that they're looking to see if these other players might be a better fit sort of thing, you know? So there's a number of things that could hold up deals. It could be personal terms, that the player wants a said salary and the club can't reach it. It might be that the selling club want a future sell-on percentage, which the buying club won't agree to. There might be certain clauses within the original contract at the club that are preventing it from being moved forward smoothly, and it might be sitting with legal, So there's a number of things. It isn't as clear cut as what, that club wants the player, that club's going to sell the player, make it happen,
There's something you mentioned there. Well, there's a couple of things that mentioned there, which were questions that I actually had. First one was, why is it that basically clubs seem to agree wages with a player before they agree a fee? Is that done with the knowledge of the club that they're buying from? Or is it just accepted in the industry that you talk to a player and say, look, we're kind of offering this sort of wage. Is that all right? And then they go from there before they've even spoken to the club.
Yeah, so the clubs wouldn't be responsible for any salary. I mean, obviously the buying club will have a purse to which they can dip into. But that'd be negotiated. The personal terms are always negotiated by the player or the player's agent. So the clubs won't get involved in a salary as such. The player will, the market will dictate what he's worth. And then the player will have a said salary. And then obviously our job is to maximise that deal. So if he's on £10,000 a week, our job is to try and maximise it to maybe turn it into £20,000 a week.
Okay.
If we can't get a straight salary increase, then we try and structure it around bonuses and rewarding progression and these sort of things, so we can top it up at every eventuality. Because also as well, I mean, if you're moving a boy who's like 26 years of age and he's going to go on, a 5-year contract or something, by the end of that contract, if he hasn't got another deal, then you've got to maximise that because he's going to be closer to retirement than what he was at the start of the contract, So the clubs don't really get involved in personal terms. That's always down to the player if he's looking after himself, or the player's agent who's looking after his interests. So what could happen, let me give you a scenario, is that a club wants a player, they'll go to an agent and say, listen, can you speak to your client and see if you might be interested in coming here? It's not supposed to happen because you're not supposed to work that way, but it happens. The agent will speak to his client, and if he says, yes, I'm very interested, then he will speak to the buying club and say, okay, but yeah, to make this work, it's going to be X amount of pound. We anticipate the transfer fee will be X, but you'll need to speak to the club about that because we don't get involved in that. That's their remit. So then technically we've put in place the personal terms with the buying club before the home club, if you like, even though that there's a club interested in taking the player. And then they'll go and knock on the door, and then they'll have the negotiation club to club, And then once everything's been satisfied, with the transfer fee from club to club and the medical's been satisfied, then we secure the personal terms.
Something that you touched on there as well, and I'll use this as an example. And what I wanted to find out was, is this normal now? But certainly when we were looking for a backup left back to Andy Robertson, Liverpool were interested, and a lot of the media attention was focused on Jamal Lewis at Norwich, and it certainly looked like he was the forerunner. A couple of days after all that news broke, Liverpool signed Tsimikas. Now, my question to you is, was the Jamal Lewis thing kind of a smokescreen, which is what you see on social media? They've used that as a smokescreen. Or was it literally they went for two players at the same time, spoke to both of them, sorted deals out, and then they just picked the best one?
Yeah, that's probably as simple as what it is. They'll just pick the best one that suits the club, they feel fits the club's philosophy and the playing style. Deals can fall down as well. It might have been that neither of the clubs wanted to lose those players, and it was down to the agent and the player putting pressure on the club to sell him. And it might have just been subject to negotiation. It gets to a stage where it works, and then they move on. I mean, Jamal might not have worked. He might not have been able to agree. The agent might have wanted too much commission. The player might have been in two minds. The club may be reluctant to sell. There's a number of reasons why. It could even come down to the player's wife doesn't want to move to that area.
Right.
All these things, they're all conducive to whether a player moves or not.
I mean, I always see that when I've spoke to journalists during transfer season, as it were, they're always very at pains to point out it's such a fluid situation. And as fans, we see it quite black and white, but there are so many factors in it. And everything you've said there just feeds into that. There's, like you say, the wife thing, they might not find a school for the kids that they're happy with or whatever, that sort of thing. I'll speak to both of you on this, Scott, because I can see you sat there quite lonely, Scott, and you're looking a bit glum. What sort
No, I'm quite interested in what Craig's saying. Actually.
This is payback for the last podcast where you excluded me. What sort of aspects on a player's contract can stall? So we hear things about image rights now, and I'm guessing social media following is a big thing. I mean, I'll come to you first, Craig, and then Scott, you can talk a little bit like that. What, are those the things that are in contracts now, image rights and social media access?
Yeah, I mean, there'll always be a clause within a contract that the club can absorb a certain amount of the image right, obviously to sell shirts and stuff like that and get some sort of return and any fees that are paid. And that's just common practice, really. Most commercial deals are bolt-ons to what, for the player and the agent. The clubs don't really, they don't really get involved as much on the commercial things. It's kind of a bolt-on that we do with the players on the side. There could be certain clauses within a contract for a very high profile player where the club want to control that, so everything's done in the best light of the club. And there might be an agreement there between the player's agent and the club that everything's going to be sat down and gone through prior to any commitments made commercially. But my experience is that normally the commercial side of the business is something that the clubs don't get involved in. It's something that we do on the side for the players to lift their profile and to sometimes to bolster their income.
Just let me go back to something you've just said there. Image rights. How does that actually work?
Well, it is just that. It's procuring a certain percentage. The player would be entitled to a percentage of his own image rights. The clubs will control an aspect of that. If it's an independent commercial deal, then it's just a negotiation like any business transaction. You can put anything into the contract. You can agree anything. I mean, even if you want 1,000 Mars bars at the end of the deal. It's open to negotiation. With regards to the clubs, it'll be agreed within the contract. When the player joins the club, of how that will be set out. A lot of it is generic with younger players. As I said, as the players get more high profile, then it is specific to the player and the level of the player.
Scott, how have you found that side of it? Obviously, I see that Harvey's got, I think, 1 million followers on Instagram. Was that something that was mentioned when you were signing your deal with New Balance, or how's that work for you?
He's got the followers probably because primarily he's obviously moved to Liverpool, which is a huge club worldwide. You look at all the players and they've all got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 billion followers, whatever. So I think that goes hand in hand. In terms of the image rights things, that's just things like boot deals. If you get a boot deal, if the agent can secure a boot deal for him, and then that comes with that, really. But it's a separate thing away from the club. Like Craig says, I'd imagine when you're a big player, that might change and the club get more involved in that. But for young players, it's pretty standard, I would suspect.
Right. Craig, you mentioned something before, and it was something. I know this is a bit delicate, so I hope you don't mind me asking you. But how are agents paid? Like, people assume that you get paid a flat fee, I think, or how does it work, or is it different depending on the level of player that you've got?
Yeah, so there is guidance on it. Normally, with young players, they get to 3 to 5% against the salary. I know there are bigger agencies that are charging up to 12% against salaries. It's also structured as well. Some agencies charge the player direct, Other agencies, they will charge the clubs and the players will be responsible for the tax element of that payment.
Well, you see that on Liverpool's accounts, it says agents' fees and it's like however million and stuff. So would that be where that
yeah, but also as well, so it depends. Because also as an agent, you can also work for clubs. So I've had situations where I work with a club and they've come to me and said, look, we want your player. But we need to move these 3 players out. Can you give us a hand to move these 3 players through your network?
Right.
So then, so then that's nothing to do with your client, your player as such. You're working on behalf of Millwall. So then you agree a commission-based fee for doing that work. So then you'll be paid directly by the club. And there are some instances where I know where a club wants a player out, another club wants the player, so you get a commission from the selling club and a commission from the buying club, nothing to do with the player's salary, and then you'll get a percentage which is agreed in your contract prior to enter the player of what your commission will be from the player. So there's different ways of structuring it. It can be quite complex depending on the level of the player. You can also get involved in if there's a huge, like we said before about commercial, if the club are holding a high percentage on the commercial side of things, you can do a negotiation on the side of that as well. It is really specific to the player and the clubs that you're working with. But, as a rule, there's against salary or a direct commission from the clubs.
If you're enjoying this video so far, please show your support for the Ken 7 channel by clicking the subscribe button, the like button, and also clicking the bell for future notifications. If you could also share the video on your Twitter and Facebook account, that will show YouTube's algorithm that you like our content. Do you know about Ken 7 merchandise? The link is in the description of this video. We have premium fanwear for fans covering Liverpool, Celtic and Scotland, and it's fanwear for young and old, so we have t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, caps, mugs, you name it, we've got it. Just something else to remember, every purchase that is made on our website, we donate to the Marina Dalglish Appeal, so you're helping a great cause as well. Greg, something I wanted to ask you about is in football deals and with your work is insurance. It's something that never gets thought about with fans, and it's obviously something that needs careful consideration. I mean, how does that work, insurance with deals and with players?
Yeah, normally it's a generic cover from a club, so the club will have a provision within the contract where they blanket cover their players. So you'll cover the club's generic medical provision. But what you can also ask for the player is that you want, as a bolt-on, you want a certain amount paid directly to the player, so he can go out and get independence medical cover as well, which covers him in the likelihood of he should get an injury that either ends his career or keeps him out of the game for a long time. So you can get an uplift in the contract where they pay you an amount, whatever you negotiate, to cover that independent policy, and then that covers the player. If should he want to go into coaching after he's injured, it pays to facilitate that. The insurance will cover him, to go into the next line of his career, whatever he wants to do as an occupation, So
is this? I mean, I'm assuming this is insurance in case something ends his career, or insurance if he gets a long-term injury, and that covers the club. They claim on the insurance there for half his wage or something. Is that how it works? Yeah,
no, it's not directly with the club. So the club give you an amount of money. So maybe it's just say, for argument's sake, you ask the club for £5,000 that goes direct to the player, paid to the player. The player then takes that and goes into an independent medical insurance company that will give him a policy. So it's something he does independent of the club. So he will still be covered by the club's medical and insurance policy, but it's something he does on the side for his own critical illness or injury. God forbid, but should it happen, then it does happen. So you've got that additional cover in place. To go on and have another career somewhere else if it isn't going to be in football.
Let me ask you about swap deals. Are they actually a thing nowadays? People seem to think that it's an easy transaction, but I imagine it's very, very complex. So it seems now that when they do a swap deal, what they do is 2 transactions rather than it being a swap. Is that because it's so complicated?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. I mean, if you're going cross-border, country to country, then it's very complicated because obviously you've got countries, say like Italy to England. Well, Italy are set up different tax-wise. They're set up differently to England. So to make that work is very difficult. I mean, within a country, there's been quite a few swap deals, but historically they're quite hard to do. How one club values a player against another player, those sort of things. But I mean, there's been a few. I mean, Sanchez went from Arsenal to Man United. Didn't he use it for Mkhitaryan?
Oh, Welbeck.
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember off the top of my head. But there's been a few. I think some of them worked out. Some of them have gone a little bit tits up. But I think Andy Cole was as well. He moved from Newcastle to Man United, didn't he, on a swap deal?
Who went the other way? Oh, Keith Gillespie and money.
That's it. That's
right.
it. Yeah, I think it's about $7.5 million plus Keith Gillespie, and they took Andy Cole, and that worked out really well, didn't it?
Like I say, it seemed to be a thing years ago, and nowadays, I mean, it's happened to Liverpool. We had Keanu Hoover went to Wolves, and we brought Jota, but it was two separate deals, even though it kind of happened at the same time. And then I realised Keanu Hoover is one of your.
Yeah, we did. Well, me and my colleagues, we did that deal. I actually done the signing for Keanu at Wolves.
Right.
I did the contract. So, yeah. I mean, that was a complicated deal. There was a lot of agents involved. There was probably about 3 different agencies plus the clubs. But it worked out best for the player. He had a really good move. He can get on with his career. It helped him, stability-wise, financially. And he's still, he's only 20 years of age, so I think it was a great, especially if you look at Liverpool and look at the boys that are in his way. He never had a pathway at Liverpool. It was a great move from Ajax to Liverpool to get him in the country and to make that next step. But then when you look at the talent that got in that position, very, very difficult to come through. So I think it was a good move for him.
Mm-hmm. Something more topical, Mo Salah's deal. You're obviously not involved with that, but it's something that's on Liverpool's fans' minds at the moment, and we desperately want him to sign, and he's making all the right noises. Even yesterday, he was saying that he loves the club and he loves the fans and he wants to sign, and it's down to the club. What are the type of things that could be delaying this deal? Is it more complex than just his weekly salary?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, there could be another club in the mix, couldn't there? And obviously he comes out and says that he loves Liverpool, wants to be there, but in the wings, you might be waiting for something to go through. You don't know. I mean, obviously I'm not involved in that. I don't know the ins and outs of that deal. But it could be the duration of the deal. It could be the salary. It could be the structure of his bonuses. It could be a number of things that he wants to get right. Or it could come down to the agents. Maybe got a couple of other, as I said, a couple of other options and that, and he wants to exhaust those before he commits. I'd argue, depending how long the contract is, it could be his last contract in England, couldn't it?
You're obviously in that game. Have you got any insight into whether that deal's going to get over the line?
No, I haven't, unfortunately. I could probably do a little bit of digging and find out. I'll call you later.
I've been naughty there, haven't I? I have been naughty. Yeah, I didn't realise.
Listen, the honest answer is I don't know. That's the honest answer. If I knew, I'd tell you. It's no skin off my nose. So no, I don't know.
You wouldn't tell us.
Scott, you can answer this. Scott, you can answer this one. Liverpool's transfer.
I don't know either.
Yeah, I'm not asking. No, I'm not.
Yeah, Scott's in a better position than me.
You are the last person I'd ask, because I know that I wouldn't get anywhere with you. So Liverpool's transfer record has been pretty miraculous in the last 5 years. There's been very few failures. Usually the failures have been one where they've panicked and brought someone in that, that perhaps they wouldn't have been looking at before. What do you think it's down to? I'll ask you, Craig, in a minute, but Scott, what do you think that's down to? Because you see it from the other side that we wouldn't possibly see it as fans.
Yeah, I just think they take their time, don't they? They don't. There's no panic buys. You don't need to panic buy. At the moment, people are talking about covering Salah and Naby and Mo and Sadio. Sorry, they're away. They're missing the Brentford game, really. 2 Arsenal games, which is the cup, which we wouldn't normally get this far. In all honesty, would we? And the Palace game, and then they'll be back pretty much. So there's no need to panic. I don't see any benefit in that, and I think it will be a case of, if a target does become available for the right price, because the selling club want that to happen, I think they would make a move. But I mean, for a Liverpool fan, you January is a no-go. It's a waste of time having a January transfer window for us, really, generally. But let's just go again in the summer. We'll wait for the summer, wait for their targets, and I'm sure they've got them. And when the time's right, they'll bring them in. But Jurgen, I don't think wants to work with a huge squad of 25, 30 internationals knocking on his door, if you like. He's happy to bring the youngsters through, which is good. if you're good enough, you're going to get that opportunity. You look at Kate Gordon a weekend, amongst others, Tyler Morton. Again, these are players coming through. And I think as a fan, there's a big excitement, isn't there, on getting a new signing? But sometimes it's right in front of you.
Yeah.
And you go back to the Chelsea. Yeah, they had Loftus-Cheek in their midfield, and they went and spent 40 million quid on
Sol
Yoko, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, back in the yeah.
Right. Never hardly played, didn't do nothing for a year, had to get rid of him. And they got Loftus-Cheek doing just as well out on loan on Palace, who surely deserve that chance. But as a fan, you want to see that big signing because it's exciting, and you do need a bit of that. But it's also great to have homegrown players coming through. And just on what we did earlier, Gav, you look at the Chelsea philosophy, and without the trouble and the ban they were in, people like Mason Mount probably would not have got that chance.
Yeah.
And now they benefit from that. And also
Reece James as well.
Yeah, Reece James. And they're top players, aren't they?
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden Chelsea look at it and fans and they go, we've brought through some homegrown talent here. And it might have been forced upon, but that's actually quite exciting as well. How good was it when Gerrard and Owen and people like that came through for us?
Well, Trent Jones, you've got Harvey coming through. It is exciting. Craig, let me ask you something. Just going back to my point about Liverpool's success in the transfer market and the way that they scout and how forensic it is, and is that something that perhaps changes as the ability to change market prices? So if Liverpool are interested in someone and it gets out that they're interested in someone, the rest of the clubs and the selling club would be like, well, we know they do their research to the nth degree. Our player's probably worth more than we think. Is that a thing, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, they will do that. And us as agents, we do that. We use that to, there might be something that gets leaked into the papers to push a player's profile or show his interest. I mean, ultimately, the clubs won't be moved on a whisper because it's the industry we're in, and every week there's a different whisper. More so, how we get the job done is we get offers, and then we go back to the club and say, listen, the contract that you've offered, it's a fantastic contract, but the club down the road think he's worth more than that, and there's a better contract on the table. Improve your offer, or we can talk to them down the road. So normally you deal with physical things rather than hearsays. Otherwise, you'd just be chasing your tail all the time, I mean, it's got a lot more stringent as well. I mean, like with the analytical side of the game as well now. It's so specific and so finely tuned now, mostly the clubs will do their due diligence maybe a year in front,
Yeah.
We was involved in the Memphis Depay deal to Barcelona. That was done the summer before, and then it was negotiated in January, and then he went in the summer. So it was a year in the making. So it's so finely tuned because players do cost a lot of money. They've got to come in, they've got to gel with the club, they've got to hit the ground running, basically. And if you're 3 games in and you're not doing it, the fans turn you quite quickly, and then it has an emotional effect on the player, which the fans don't see, but it does. Everyone's human.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, the player's going backwards. You spend one season in that club, the manager gets ridiculed for bringing him in, and so they're so meticulous. And these guys in the recruitment divisions at these clubs, they're like machines. They strip everything back. They get all the ins and outs. They look at the personalities. They look at the pathway. They look at how he, the stats, what he produces on the pitch, in and out of position, all these things. So they really make sure that they're meticulously getting that right profile into the club.
So Liverpool, I mean, obviously this is a Liverpool podcast, Craig, so I have to keep going back to Liverpool, and that's something that we're interested in. Liverpool have been very, very, very adept at keeping things quiet. So we've had, over the last few years, we've had transfers that have come out of nowhere. So Fabinho literally was linked Man United. A couple of days after the Champions League final, Liverpool signed Fabinho. It literally happened in the media within about 3 hours. We linked with him and it was signed. Same with Diogo Jota. That came out of nowhere as well. And you've just said that you were kind of half involved in that deal, certainly the Keanu Hoover side. So, I mean, how are Liverpool able to do that? I mean, would there be non-disclosure agreements signed before, to try and keep it quiet, or have they just been very clever at it?
No, I mean, it also could happen that the player wasn't available, suddenly become available, and he was just fitted perfectly. I mean, if Firmino's agent is is up to speed. You understand the market. You know what player suits a certain kind of club, and if your player suits that club and there's an opportunity because there's a space in there, it's our job to go knock on the door and say, listen, he's available. How can we get this to work? And then, if you're a club and you've got the opportunity to sign in a player and he fits and all the boxes are ticked, it can happen very quickly, So it could be just that he wasn't available, then he was available, and then it was like, listen, let's jump on him quick before somebody else does. And then on the other side of it, it could have been that they have scouts, these big clubs like Liverpool. I mean, they've got scouts every corner of the world looking for that talent, reporting back. It gets passed down the chain back to the club, and then the due diligence that they do on these players, it could be that there was only maybe 3 people involved that knew about the player, and they made the decision quickly. It was passed up to the gaffer, and he said, yes, I'm having him, and bang, it was done.
Craig, sorry, can I ask just on that? And you don't have to answer it, but it'd be nice if you did. And sorry to put you on the spot, but during the Kijana transfer to Wolves, did you know about the Jota potentially going to Liverpool before it was released? Were you aware of that on the cards?
No, myself, no, I wasn't aware of that. Right. So as I said, there's quite a few other agencies.
Yeah, so a totally separate transaction that you didn't have a clue about.
Yeah. I mean, that at the time, obviously once it was moving forward, then yeah, I knew about it because obviously it was in the mix. But at the time negotiating it, there was no, we wasn't aware of it until it was on the table, sort of thing. So the truth was, we wasn't aware of that until actually we got there and we see the mechanics of it. And like I said, there was a few other agents that were involved, who were working directly with the club. Obviously, the way that we work, we're a little bit more closed loop than other agencies. It's very rare that we work with mandates with other agencies and stuff. So our player, normally we're involved in it. There's no third parties taking place with that. So that's why they had to bring us in to get that deal done, Yeah. So that answers your own.
No, that's fine. And the Kijana stuff, obviously, because I'm quite interested in this as well. You, at the time, looking at your client at Liverpool, you didn't feel like there was a pathway. So how long in the making was the deal to Wolves before it happened?
It happened quickly. So initially, obviously, a club wants a player and identifies a player and thinks he can be that one. So they'll dress it up and they'll sell you the dream and they'll bring you in, which was fantastic, and it was a really good positive move for him moving from Holland to England. But then you get to watch inclusion performances, where they're playing him, all these things. Now, if you remember when he first came, he started playing as a centre back, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When he's a right wing back. They tried to force him because they had Trent Alexander and
Nico
Williams. Yeah, they had them there. So they're trying to really maybe squeeze him over. They know his qualities. They know he's a great player. So how can we infiltrate him into this structure? It just wasn't happening, and we could see that happening. And obviously, we speak to the player and we're party to the conversations that he has with the club and the coaches and stuff. And he's like, I'm not feeling this is, and so you build a picture up, and straight away, at 19 years of age, he needs to play to develop. He's playing at a level that could be arguably be one of the best league in the world. He's getting bit parts, but he's still not quite that player because he needs to develop. So you look at that and you think, well, okay, we're aware that he needs a sideways move. So we need to try, whether it's still in England or it's back in Europe, he needs to move sideways at the level to move on again. So the deal came through, the offer came through quite quickly. The two clubs kind of agreed it quite quickly, is my understanding, and then we was called in to negotiate the personal terms. And I mean, I'm not a direct player agent. One of my colleagues is a direct player agent, but because I'm based in England, myself, one of my other colleagues, we went there and oversee the deal, checked the paperwork, done the signings, was there to represent Kiana.
Yeah. One of the, or a couple of things, I mean, that philosophy doesn't work at academy level, as we know, in terms of players not quite being at the level of a Cat 1 club but a good Cat 2 player. Obviously, there's not really agents involved at that age, so you can't really make that move. But one of the ones that interest me, because Harvey was at Fulham, there was a lad called Cody Dremmer there.
Yep.
Now, you won't have an insight of this, I'm sure, but it's just to get your opinion. So he's moved to Leeds United. On that, he would have been based on, look, come in with the promise, if you do this, if you do that, blah, blah, blah. So for his career, he's thinking, this is a good move. I'm going to start playing first-team football at Leeds. Yeah. Now, that hasn't materialised at all. He's now got on board. He looks like he's going to be moving to Cardiff on loan now to play. So what do you think goes wrong in terms of, from your point of view, you move a player to a club, he's promised this, that and the other, and I know ultimately it's black and white, it's down to the player to do it. If the player's doing well enough, he's playing. It's as simple as that for me. If he's not, he's not. Right, that's down to the player. But do you think there's any other thing involved there where you go, God, I've just moved him here and now it's not
I think that there's a number of things. I mean, obviously, as you just rightly said, can't play for the player. The player's got to turn up. He's got to have them performances and hit the ground running, as I mentioned before. Secondly, he might have picked up an injury, which he can't get over. Thirdly, there's the welfare and the social aspect of it. He might not have settled in that area, so he couldn't get the best performances. I had a lad that moved from South London to Scotland. First 2 weeks, the club were making a massive fuss on him. Everything was catered for. After 2 months, he's just become part of the the club, part of the infrastructure, and everyone forgot about him. He was just getting on with it. But for him, that shift in location, he just couldn't settle. And because he couldn't settle, and he's on the phone to his parents, he wanted to come home, and any opportunity to get away from the club, or like a day off and stuff like that, to come all the way back down to London, and you're thinking your focus is not there, So there could be a number of things.
People forget they're human beings.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't they? Fans forget they're human beings at the end of the day.
Exactly, and it depending on your character, it does. It weighs heavy on these young, and they're young lads. They're young lads. They've come from mum and dad driving them to and from, and always in the crowd supporting and all these things, and then eventually, they get dropped in another country, being Scotland, and they're on their own. And it isn't just about football. They've got to live with another family. They've got to adapt to their surroundings and gelling with the club. Sometimes it clicks and sometimes it doesn't, our job as agents is to set them up the best way we can, maximise the deal, get the best financials we can for them, security we can for them, because if you can do that for a player, then it's very hard for the club to move sideways on the player because they've got to get a return on that. So we try and get those best possible contracts in place, and then it comes down to the social and the player turning up and playing, and getting those.
Craig, let me just ask you, how much of this is done? I mean, it always cracks me up that back in the day that you'd see in the media they've faxed something over. How much of this is done now by Zoom? How much of it's done? At what stage do you have to go and actually visit the club with the player and all that sort of stuff? I mean, is it an easier process now because of the technology?
Yeah. So what? I mean, technically, I'm told club-to-club faxes are still used.
Why does that not surprise?
That's what I'm told. Yeah, the knock on the door is a fax. Yeah,
that is ridiculous.
Yeah,
wow.
I'm told that is still the policy. But I mean, from our side, how we do it is that we get the initial interest. Then, if the other club agrees, then the buying club will arrange a meeting where I'll take the player in and they'll convince the player why he's their target, what they see in him, what the pathway will be, where they see him, how they're going to elevate his career, including all these things. They've got to convince him that it's the right club for him. So we'll go, before COVID, we'll sit face to face and they'll do a presentation and they'll bring the big wigs in and the manager. The manager will come in and say, listen, you're my guy and this is why, and et cetera, et cetera. And then after all that, they sign somewhere else.
Why you've just mentioned that, it's just come to my mind. What the amount of players you've moved, Craig, and you've been in at their meetings, how much would you look back and say it was just bullshit to get him in the door? Whether that's to get a player cheap and then move him on for bigger money, or how many? And I know managers change, et cetera, but the managers that have done that meeting and said to the player, A, B, and C, and not really followed that through. Isn't it quite? Because that must be frustrating for obviously the player and yourself, really, because you're doing what's best for your client, and with the best will in the world, you're going on that guy's trust and word.
Yeah. I mean, normally it's very rare because we are quite meticulous in getting the player there, because our reputation and livelihood. It states on it, isn't it? If you're giving wrongful advice and things ain't working out, then you're gonna have a very short career. But I mean, so we do the best that we can and our utmost to make sure that doesn't happen and make sure he's the right fit. I remember going back when Mark Hughes was at Southampton, and there was a young player that they wanted to take down. Now, Mark had nothing to do with the deal; it was all to do with the academy and that. But then when we looked at it, the stats, and I think it was like Mark had been a manager that time for about 5 years, and in his 5 years, he'd played one youth player in his first team in a 5-year period. And you think to yourself, well, listen, our player's got no chance of playing first team there. He's going to knock on the door to the board and say, I want money to go and buy that player who's already established,
Yeah.
And I believe like Mourinho was the same sort of character. He demands results there and then, and he wants to get the players who can come in and deliver straight away. So, in my experience, I'm not saying it hasn't happened, because I'm sure it does, and it is happening. But in my experience, we're so careful with those moves that, we make sure it's the right fit. You can't change anything, we had a lad who moved to Portugal and fantastic talent. He went in there, he was absolutely flying. The manager brought him in, sold us the dream, and went over there. He was doing tremendous. Within the first 6 months, Galatasaray came in for him. They were talking millions, Champions League level club, like to take him. 6 months forward, 5 managers later, within 6 months, now the player's totally out of favour, So you can't have those things,
Yeah, that's fair enough.
I found this fascinating. I really, really appreciate your time, Craig. It's been brilliant. Before I let you go, have you got any stories of deals? I did ask you this before. I don't know whether you thought of anything that was unusual or quite funny, or something happened during the deal which changed the direction of it.
Not me personally, really. I'm a bit of a boring git. I don't leave anything down to chance, but with transfers, other people's transfers, I've heard there's been loads of clauses in. One clause, I think they've done a can't fly clause. I think Bergkamp had a clause in his contract that if they had an away game and they had to fly, that he could be left out of the squad because he wouldn't fly.
What?
Yeah, you can research that. Bergkamp wouldn't take a plane.
Oh no, Bergkamp. Yeah, no, Bergkamp. That was famous that he didn't fly.
Yeah,
and they'd have to drive him if it was an important news.
Drive a boat. Yeah, he wouldn't get on a plane. So, but he had that actually written in his contract.
That was in his contract.
Yeah. So
incredible.
Yeah. So, but sorry, there's no stories from my own experience.
Well, listen, brilliant. Thank you so much. Honestly, it's been fascinating. I really, really appreciate it. And Scott, thank you for your time as well, and for introducing us to Craig so that we can talk to him. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hit the like button as well. But gents, thanks very much. Really appreciate it.
Top man.
Pleasure. Take care.